are posting things and everybody's attributing that to us.
Okay, we can look, let's look at it, because we can also report it to Facebook and they'll take it down.
Great.
Yes,
Thank you.
I knew it.
Erica.
Here.
Solver of problems, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other announcements. Okay, here we are with Arica. Underwood, here we go. Oh, she's got my brother's set on, I'm so excited.
Hi, how are you today? My name is Arica Underwood. It looks like Arica. Also looks like Alicia because it starts with an A, but it's actually Arica. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. I actually grew up in a housing project on the west side, so called the Bay Apartments. And I went to Washington Park Elementary School. Also went to Walnut Hills High School. My mom was a Cincinnati public school teacher. So I went to Tuskegee University, University of Cincinnati College of Law, and now here I am. I've been an attorney for over 23 years. I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer based on, kind of where I grew up and what I used to see when I grew up. For the last 12 years, I've worked for the Hamilton County Public Defender's Office. So I represent people who are the most vulnerable in our society. I started in the Municipal Court Division of my office, and then I was promoted to the Felony Division. And I am there every single day. I'm in the jail almost every day. I'm in the courthouse every single day. I can tell you anything that you want to know about any courtroom and any judge because I'm there every single day. And the reason I am running for judge is because we need a different perspective from our judges. We need judges who understand that there is a person standing in that courtroom, and you have to look at everything about that person. So in municipal court, we call it the people's court because that's where most people who encounter the court system encounter the way that they encounter it. So from speeding tickets, evictions, and then your, criminal trespass, assault, theft, all of those things, passing bad checks, those are all cases that are heard in municipal court. There are 14 municipal court judges. Only 4 of them are women. 8 of them are from one political party and 6 of them are from the other. The reason why that's important is because the majority tends to set the policies and the rules that control how the court is run. So that's why, this election is so important, because if we can get a couple of more seats in that court, then there would be a more equal saying of how policies are made within that court. Also, what I want you to know is, as a public defender, coming from that perspective, most of our judges used to be prosecutors. So the way that you think, it's kind of pounded into your head, if you think about it. So when you are a prosecutor, you are coming from like a punishment perspective. What penalty is appropriate? And what I hear a lot of times is, when I'm standing there with a client and they're placed on probation, a judge will say to me, well, I just gave your client a break by putting them on probation. But what you should know is that a criminal conviction is a punishment itself. So probation is just adding an additional penalty on top of that. But, unless you really understand how difficult it is for people to get a job after they have a criminal conviction, you really don't understand that the criminal conviction itself is a penalty. So what I think we need more of are diversion programs. In other words, programs that keep people from getting those criminal convictions. Now, every case won't qualify for that, but theft cases, passing bad check cases where a person writes a check and, it bounces, from certain areas, those people are prosecuted, and from certain other areas, people have the ability just to pay the check and kind of move on. We should give everybody the opportunity to just pay the check, and that way they don't have something called passing bad checks on their record. There used to be a program in Hamilton County called Private Complaint Mediation Service. And when, Cincinnati police officers would refer people to Private Complaint Mediation Service, every passing bad check case got referred there. Every theft from Kroger's got referred there. And what happened is that there was a mediator, and I used to work there, that's how I know how it worked. There was a mediator, and the mediator would kind of mediate the dispute between the parties. And a lot of times, even people, when they're neighbors who've gotten into fights, or boyfriend, girlfriend, that kind of thing, they would be sent to mediation. And as long as they came up with an agreement, whatever the agreement was, then there was no criminal conviction, there was no criminal charge filed. And that's what we need more of. We need more programming like that. And when Private Complaint Mediation Service was in place, we had an 80% success rate. So 80% of the cases that were referred there actually resolved themselves without the need to go into the courthouse. And that's what we need more of. In addition to that, we need bail reform. So there are so many people who are sitting in jail right now because they just don't have any money. And, when you set a bond that is $1,000 at 10% or $5,000 at 10%, if you're working or if you have family and friends or some kind of support, you can come up with $100. You think to yourself, like, that's not a problem at all. But I have clients who cannot come up with $100. So to me, we're causing people to lose everything over $100. So if you're locked up for $100 for whatever crime that you're accused of, and you don't have this $100, and you have children, then Jobs and Family Services come and they take your children out of the home. So now you've lost your children. And if you're locked up and you can't afford that bond, you're not paying your rent, so then, you're facing eviction. And then, of course, if you missed a week of work, you lose your job. And if you don't have that paycheck, you lose your car. So basically, people are incentivized to plead guilty to things that they may not be guilty of because they just cannot afford to sit in a jail cell and fight those cases. Yes?
I was reading some things recently that also the judge takes away the driver's license from the person, and that prevents them from reporting to a job and so forth.
Yes,
Is that a
so
problem in Hamilton County?
that is a problem in Hamilton County. So when you are assessed fines and court costs, they give you a certain amount of time to pay those fines and court costs. And if you only make minimum wage, which is, something around $10 an hour, if you can believe that, then your budget is very tight. Once you pay your rent and your utilities and buy food, there's not a whole lot left. So if there's fines and court costs that you have to pay, you just simply cannot afford to pay them. So what happens is that the judges will refer it to collections and your driver's license is suspended until you pay those fines and court costs. And that includes parking tickets even. You get a parking ticket and you cannot afford to pay it, it doubles, and then they put a block on your driver's license and your license plates. So of course, it just kind of perpetuates the poverty. And just causes people additional problems. So when they get pulled over, because you've got to, if you have a job in Hamilton County, the bus system is not that great. So a lot of times you've got to drive because a lot of the places where people can work who have criminal records, they're not on the bus line. So they have to drive to get there. And then, I've had clients who've explained to me that, if they can't drive, then people want to charge them $5 and $10 per ride. if you can imagine that. So imagine whatever you make for 1 hour of work or 2 hours of work. You know, you work 8 hours and 2 hours of whatever you've earned, you have to give someone to take you to work and pick you up. So that really means you're only earning 6 hours for your work for any particular day, just to have a job. And we need more judges who understand that, who understand kind of how all of these things work together. And our court system shouldn't be about making a profit for people. If you can't afford to pay the fines and the court costs, we can have an indigency hearing. In other words, we can find that a person cannot afford to pay and then waive those fines and court costs. We can also make them eligible for community service. Of course, the problem with that is that if you have a full-time job, when do you have time to go work another, do community service? So a lot of times what happens is when people are given these penalties, the penalties themselves compound their situation and just make their situation worse. They can't get out of the revolving door because once you've stepped into it, everything that happens to you is, it's kind of designed to keep you in there. So then there's probation. So the probation officers report to the judges, and people are violated for every little thing. If you work an hourly job, you cannot show up at random for any kind of appointment. You have to let your job know that you can't, you're not going to be at work. And if you don't have the kind of job where you can say, you don't work a salaried position, and sometimes if you do, you can't just call your boss and say, hey, I'm not going to be there today, or hey, I'm going to be 2 hours late. If you work at an hourly job like at a restaurant or at a factory, you cannot do that. You cannot just not show up every month at random, or you risk losing your job. So some people are placed in the position of having to choose, do I go to work or do I possibly violate my probation? And a lot of times the judge and the probation officers aren't very receptive or even understanding of the fact that in order to keep your job. Oh, what did I do? I don't know, I think I unplugged something.
You're on probation now.
I'm not sure I can unplug it, but I'm not sure how I.
It's working. It's working.
I think, okay.
That's good.
So, you can't just show up for random appointments. And when you're on probation, there's multiple random appointments. There's random urine screens. And there's random appointments with your probation officer. And you simply cannot do that if you're working an hourly job. And, if you're coming from a different perspective, if you're coming from the perspective of a public defender, like I am, then I understand that, you can't, we can help people so that they don't get into trouble anymore, and we can penalize people for when a penalty is necessary. But let's let the punishment fit the crime. An appropriate punishment should not be losing everything you own, including your children, because you've been convicted of a misdemeanor. So we need more programs in place that will allow people, and we need to treat people as if they're not going to be there forever, and as if we want them to kind of turn things around and make things better. The other problem with our municipal court is that people don't really understand how the court system works. And this is a part of what my platform is. It's called Justice Understood. Because what most people aren't aware of is that most bonds that are set in Hamilton County for felonies and misdemeanors are set by a municipal court judge. So when you are arrested and you're taken to jail, there's a municipal court judge who sets your bond. Now, we know, because, public defenders are there every single day. So we can look at the name of the judge and tell you whether you're going home or not. We can look at the name of the judge and say, you know what, you're probably not going to go home. It doesn't matter if it's a low-level nonviolent offense, you're probably not going to go home. And it should not be that way. It shouldn't be that. If you are, and what I find myself doing when I'm making bond arguments a lot of times is arguing to the judge. There is a presumption of probation. So the law says that even if this person is convicted of everything that they're being accused of today, then you have to put them on probation. So if you have to put that person on probation, why are you holding them in jail until their case finally makes its way into a courtroom? And a lot of times that falls on deaf ears. And so we get these bonds that are, they seem reasonable. If you make enough money to pay them, then it seems very reasonable to you. But $100 might as well be $1 million if you don't have it, and you don't have anyone who can pay it for you. Another problem that we have in our justice system are what we call trial taxes. So what happens is that you get into a courtroom and you want to exercise your right to a trial. Everyone has the right to a trial. Everyone has the right to a jury trial. But, some judges don't want to be in the courthouse past 12 o'clock. So the notion of you having a trial or a jury trial that would keep them there until 4 o'clock every day, they're not happy about that. So what they'll say to you or hint to you, not on the record because it's illegal, but when you come back into chambers, what gets said to you is, if your client loses, then I'm inclined to give them the maximum penalty. So they've not made any promises and they haven't said what they're going to do, but you understand that if you lose at trial, then your client is going to get the maximum sentence. And so I've seen people who, they just insist on a trial, and if they're convicted, the judge gives them 180 days in jail without regard of whether they have a past conviction, without regard of what they have going on, whether they have children, whether they have a job. It doesn't seem to matter. And that's what a trial tax is, and there should never be a trial tax. And that is a huge problem in Hamilton County. We need judges who don't mind working a full day. And as a public defender, not only do I work days, I work evenings and I work weekends. So honestly, an 8 to 4 day would be a reduction in hours for me. I would be more than happy to serve the citizens of Hamilton County by actually showing up to work and staying the entire day the way that I'm supposed to. The other thing is that all of the dockets, or most of them, are set at 9 o'clock. So you've got all of these people coming into the courthouse at the exact same time. So there's long lines to get into the courthouse on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And then people are sitting around for 2 and 3 hours waiting for their cases to be heard. But then in the afternoon, and the other thing about that is that if you are not in someone's courtroom by 10 o'clock, then your cell phone starts to blow up with text messages from the courtroom. Hey, what time are you going to get here? We're ready for your case to be heard. Can you get here right now? Because the judges want to leave by 11:30 or 12 o'clock. And then the courthouse is deserted in the afternoons. And what might be more effective is if we set some cases in the morning and other cases in the afternoon. That way, everything is not, because it's only convenient to have all of the cases heard at 9 o'clock to the judge. It's not convenient to the victims, the prosecuting witnesses. It's not convenient to defendants. It's not convenient to attorneys. It's only convenient to judges who want to leave before noon. And that's not a spirit of service. So that's a part of what's going on in Hamilton County. And then, of course, because of what goes on in the courthouse, because remember, municipal court, there's all those little, just the smaller cases that you can think of are heard in municipal court. So what happens is that it impacts people who have children. And then when parents are impacted, the children are impacted. So when the children are impacted, then, when they go to school, they're acting out in school, or they're not showing up for school. It impacts everything. It impacts what happens to children in our classroom. And it keeps poor people poor. And if you have a different system in place, if you have different judges with different perspectives, we can change our criminal justice system. And, we can treat people better. Everyone who walks into a courtroom should be treated with dignity and respect. And they should understand exactly what's going on, even if they don't agree with it. They understand what happened, and they believe that it's fair. And that's what we need more of in our courthouse. So that is why I am running for judge. So municipal court is divided into districts, and I am running in District 6. That includes Colerain Township, Greene Township, parts of Springfield Township, and Cheviot. So there are seven districts in Hamilton County, and we are the only county in the state of Ohio who does our municipal court races this way. But there are 7 districts in Hamilton County. The people in one particular district vote for the judge, but the judge serves all of Hamilton County. So any case that's filed in Hamilton County can go to any particular judge. And we need judges with different perspectives, just to kind of change what's going on in our community. The other thing I kind of neglected to mention are, the evictions. That seems to be just kind of a growing problem. Seems to be just like this huge thing. And maybe, and right now the evictions are all heard by magistrates. They're not even heard by the judges. But if a judge has the right to hear their own cases. So maybe if we had something where people have a way to get caught up on their rent, they don't lose their place to live. Because if you lose your place to live, it's very difficult to save the money to get another place. And in addition to that, now you have that eviction on your record, and nobody wants to rent to you when they see that. Does anybody have any questions?
I got a few.
When Charmaine McGuffey was here, she articulated something that appealed to me as very radical. She said, jail should only be to protect the public from dangerous people. It should not be about punishment at all.
Amen.
Does that make sense to you?
It does. And I do agree with that. Most of the time when, the people who should be in jail are people who are actually going to cause some kind of major harm to people, and that's why they're there. If there's any, we call our prisons the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction, but that's not what it's about at all. It's kind of about slave labor. You have prisoners who are working for pennies, working for private companies, and it should not be that. So if the prisons are run by privately held companies, then, there's no incentive to not send people to prison, because it's not really paid for by the taxpayers. And these companies are incentivized to have people working for them that they don't have to pay, a full regular salary with benefits. So I agree with that. It should be about keeping the community safe from those people who are going to cause us harm. Yes.
Our criminal justice system basically punishes people, as you said. We have an economic system that creates poverty and then punishes it. And so the criminal justice system is part of that. It's cheaper to send somebody to Harvard than to prison. So it's a policy choice we're gonna create poverty and then we're gonna punish these folks who are in poverty. It's also a jobs program for attorneys and police and prison guards. And it's as corrupt as anything else in the country. And maybe we ought to just do anything with that system.
Well, what I would say to that is
It's not
that
working.
it's not working because of the people who are in place as judges and as prosecutors and defense attorneys. We need to have the right people in place. And we need to also understand that there is a very small percentage of people who absolutely need a timeout from society. But that's not the majority of people who get sent away, who get put in jail, and who get put in prison. If you are addicted to a drug, we need to figure out how to cure that addiction. Sending someone to jail or sending them to prison is not going to cure the addiction. It's not going to cure the stress or the behaviors that lead them to using the drug. All it does is it takes them off the street for a while, and then they go back and they use the drug, they don't have a tolerance for it, then they overdose. So, I don't think that we should do away with the criminal justice system because there are people who absolutely need a timeout from society. But, we probably could get away with having one prison in the state of Ohio as opposed to the plethora of prisons we currently have.
Right, all the folks in prison though are poor and are predominantly minorities. So in fact, it's really clear how it's used.
Absolutely.
And
But
I like your point about the prosecutors and how they think. And our legislatures are full of attorneys who are also prosecutors. And it includes Kamala Harris, I think.
what I will think about it this way. When you grow up a certain way, thinking a certain way, everything that you look at, even the way, if you grow up and your parents disciplined you in a certain way, then you tend to look at your children and discipline them that same way. That's just your brain is hardwired to think a certain way, and it's really difficult to kind of step outside of that. When you are a public defender, you don't have a penalty kind of mindset. You have the mindset of, okay, I'm looking at this person standing right here in front of me right now. What can I do to make sure that this person doesn't get in trouble again? And how can we make it so that not only that they don't get in trouble again, but they can kind of make their lives better? And that's what we need more of when it comes to judges.
Is there any way we can get information on which judges like to be out of the courthouse by 12? And also which ones give the maximum sentence on trials? Because it would be interesting to
There is
know.
a complete lack of transparency when it comes to what goes on in the courthouse. And what I will tell you is that the way that the court system works, there's an administrative judge, and the judges all vote on who's going to be the administrative judge or the presiding judge every year. And the majority always wins. So if the majority are Republicans, then there's always a Republican who's the administrative judge. And there's never a Democrat. So because they've always been in the majority, they always vote on, that's who the administrative judge is going to be. And until we can get, a majority of judges who believe in transparency, who believe that we should be posting statistics on how many people come into this courtroom, these are the people who were convicted, these were the sentences that they received, these are the number of people who went to trial, this is what the sentence was after they went to trial. That is how you would figure that out. The other thing that I can tell you is that the courthouse is a public building. It is the people's building. It is owned by you. Come down any day. As a matter of fact, come down Friday. This week on Friday, come down at 1 o'clock and just walk around. Try to open up any courtroom door. And you can see who's there. There are judges who don't even show up on Fridays.
So we could come in and, if we wanted to do this as a group project.
Absolutely. I encourage you to do that, as a matter of fact. It wouldn't take very long because the judges who are there, you can count them on one hand.
Okay, that sounds like
But you
a
can
great-
also tell who wants to get out by underneath their robes, they've got their golf shoes on, ready to go out the door.
That's what fun to know too.
You were so articulate about the issues of the horrendous system. I was the director of 2 youth service bureaus in Illinois, one in Chicago and one in rural Illinois. And I can testify that when young people have the opportunity to have assistance outside the court system, there's a possibility for reform. We intervened when kids got in trouble with police 24/7. And we provided family systems therapy in the family because usually the kid was acting out some issue in the family. And when that could get rectified, the recidivism rate was very, very low. So, so I speak in favor of that, but I'm also wanting to, well, I had a friend who wrote in Illinois the book, Our Kindly Parent, the State, which was, kind of a joke title, really, because the state was not our kindly parent, and documented like you have, the fallacies of that system. But I'm wondering, what is the vehicle here, committee, organization, whatever, that's working for this kind of reform?
I'm not aware of anything. And what I will tell you about our juvenile court system, which is a whole nother huge ball of mess, is that what I've seen happen is that 2 kids from Walnut Hills High School, one kid, they get into a fight over a cell phone, and one kid takes the cell phone from another one. The principal resolves it. This is the prior principal and the current principal. They resolve it at the school. They're not calling law enforcement. Whatever the punishment is, it's something that happens at Walnut Hills. But by comparison, 2 kids from a different high school, it's a completely different story. And I think what I see this a lot at Doane Community School, and I know that's not a Cincinnati public school. 2 kids get into a fight over a cell phone, and they're kids. 16, 15, 14, they're still kids. 2 kids get into a fight over a cell phone, one punches the other, takes the cell phone. Law enforcement is called, and that kid is charged with robbery as a felony. And then they're taken to 2020, so now they're not going to school. And depending on who the prosecutor is and who the judge is, they're bound over into adult court, depending on how many times that's happened to them. So it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be, every time a kid gets into an altercation, they get hauled off to 2020. Let's figure out what the underlying causes and sources are. And I was at a forum where I heard somebody say that every kid who assaults a school teacher should automatically, get kicked out of school. Well, let's think about that for a moment. A lot of times what happens, I know at one particular school, is that the kids get into fights and the teachers try to break those fights up because they're trying not to have these kids hurt each other. And if a kid is flailing around and they don't know who they're swinging at, they think they're swinging at the other person, they're closing their eyes, then they're not trying to hit the teacher. They're trying to hit the other person. Yet they get charged with a felony for if the teacher gets hit. And a lot of times, even if the teacher comes to court and says, listen, I don't want this child going to jail, don't want this child going to prison, it doesn't matter. That's just kind of what we're dealing with right now. And again, there has to be like a complete shakeup of the system in order to kind of change those things and the way that those things happen.
I have a question about the diversionary.
Can you put
programs
the
that you talked
microphone
about.
closer, because we can't hear it?
The diversionary programs that you were talking about, they sound very logical and everything. Is there a cost factor involved that would keep them from happening, or is it just there hasn't been enough, importance placed on it?
I believe that there would be a cost because there's employees involved in that. However, even the diversion program that they have in place right now, they charge people a lot of money to participate in that. So if you're poor, you can't pay $800 to participate in a diversion program to keep it off your record. I believe that we could restructure our budgets to make that a priority and include that in the court's budget. There's gotta be a way to do that because they charge money for everything. There's court costs, there's fines, there's costs that they charge people to be on probation. Maybe if we take some of that money and use it for those kinds of diversion programs that I was specifically like a mediation program, then we don't have as many people going through our system. But again, because there are so many people making money off of this system, that there's no incentive for them to create programs that keep people out of the system because they only make money when people are in the system.
Follow the money, as we say every week, follow the money.
Richard, if you care to comment on the Timothy Thomas shooting, he had 14 warrants, all of them were minor traffic, turn signal, seatbelt, but he kept falling through the system, and he made poor decisions, but it just seems like somehow that this could have been avoided. I mean, 14 warrants. Would it make sense to have just throw him in jail and make him face drugs the next morning and figure it out, or what?
Here's the thing with that. They're saying that they were warrants, but what they were really were, it was a capias. And he didn't have and I'm not really, I remember that situation, so I'm not gonna say, I'll try to speak in such a way that I don't get myself in trouble by violating any ethical canons. But here's what I'll say, just kind of in general. A lot of law enforcement officers are afraid they're afraid of young black men because, we've perpetuated this myth that they're dangerous. So, when they're approaching a young African-American man, they tend to pull out their weapon and point their weapon. And I've represented individuals and I've seen the body cams, which, those body cams are very enlightening. And I've seen at traffic stops where the officers are all pointing their guns at the car. Or I've seen when they're stopping people on the street that they've all pulled their guns out and they're pointing their guns at people. So I think that a lot of it is that there's just, the implicit bias, which is another problem with our system of where, this person who looks this way is dangerous. And I think that was a lot of what happened in that case. And then there's also, on the other side, that, there are these young people who believe that running is better than standing and facing it because they're scared. So their instinct is to immediately run because they think that if I stop and I try to face this, I'm going to get charged with something that I didn't do. And that's why they run. It's not that they're afraid of getting, facing whatever it is that they did do. They're afraid of being charged with something that they didn't do. And that's why they run.
Yeah, and not to defend Officer Rocha in any way. My understanding was at the time, you didn't know if a warrant was for running a stop sign or for murder. So those kids got 14 warrants, we got to chase them down and the fingers on the trigger. And also, coming back to what you said, I'm writing a little play about this, so it's kind of close to home. Had Timothy been a kid from Wyoming, or a suburban area, there would have been a very different income. The bias, obviously, I think you're saying, you're implying still exists.
Absolutely. I think and again, when you're in the courthouse every single day, you see all kinds of things that you can't quite explain everything to everybody because there is so much. But I've seen police officers who have gone to someone's home and knocked on the door and said, Mrs. Smith, your son has a KBS out. Can you just take him? Can we just recite him to court and have him come to court? But that doesn't happen in every neighborhood. It only happens in some neighborhoods.
I want to thank you so much for being a public defender all these years. You're a hero.
You bet.
I really appreciate it. You could be making big bucks working at Procter & Gamble or something.
Yeah.
And thanks for running too, because I've been involved with the criminal justice system since 1975, and it is so awful. And we need people like you to be involved, and I really appreciate it. But I'm a little worried about you because Judge Hunter got crushed for doing what you just described we ought to do.
Well,
So I really hope you're not the next victim.
here's what I will say about that. For over 12 years, I have been in a pool swimming with sharks. And you have to understand how to fight within a system where you have to fight everyone. You have to go into a courtroom and fight the prosecutor, and you have to fight the judge. There's a lot of times when my client looks, we're sitting at the table about to start a trial, the jury comes in, and he leans over, or she leans over, mostly he, leans over and says to me, Miss Arica, we're the only black people in here. I am used to that. I am used to swimming in a tank full of sharks. I am used to having people try to bully you. I am used to the, if you don't do this, then we're asking for the max. And in my head, there's violin music playing. I'm like, tra la 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 la, okay. Tell me something different. I am used to it. And unfortunately, Judge Hunter had that kind of thought that most people have, that, attorneys and judges kind of do what they're supposed to do. And that's absolutely not the case. They use bully tactics and, just kind of sneaky things. And I've watched it every day for the last over 12 years. So I know full well what I'm getting into. And that's kind of the difference. She went into it just expecting that everybody was going to do what they were supposed to do, because that's what we believe. We want to believe that people are good at heart, that they're going to do what they're supposed to do, and that's just not what she found, and that's not what happens in our courthouse at all. And again, I encourage you, if you want to see who's not there on a Friday, come down this Friday and just walk around the hallways. But other than that, come and sit in a courtroom, and I can tell you which courtrooms to go sit in. Just come and sit and see how judges talk to people, how they dress them down, and just give them these, awful lectures, where, you don't know what everyone has a story, everyone has a backstory, everybody has a history or a herstory. You have to figure out what that is, without being so, what I'm gonna call judgy. Just, assuming that the way that you were raised is the only right or correct way to raise a person. You have to, everybody comes from a different background, and you have to understand those things. And, in our system, it's just not that way. So I, again, will encourage you all to please, please, please come down to the courthouse. I know there's another group who's been coming down and kind of watching. And, you'll sit in a courtroom and you'll see, just how many people just kind of prison. And, there are some courtrooms where they're like, people are so programmed that they're like, I just want to go to prison. And the judge is like, no, you're not going to go to prison. You're going to be a productive member of society, so I'm reinstating your probation. And so you see the differences. And it is very obvious if you sit there for just an hour, you can immediately tell what kind of courtroom you're in. And that should not be.
Two quick things. Tomorrow morning at 9:30, David Singleton is presenting at Ollie over at Victory Parkway, and you all could just walk in. He's talking about the criminal justice system and what he's been doing. So if you're interested in this topic, come over. 9:30, Victory Parkway, the big hall. In the 70s, I was working in the criminal justice system with people without addiction. And I had a young black man who wrote me a letter. He was in the workhouse. He wanted to get to a treatment program for heroin. So I went with him in Judge Nadel's courtroom.
Oh dear.
And Judge Nadel looked down at him and said, son, you don't need a treatment program, what you need is a job. And if you get out of the workhouse, if you get a job, I'll let you out of the workhouse. Now just think about how stupid and mean that is. That a job would fix his addiction, that an 18-year-old black kid is gonna get a job while he's in the workhouse. And that just shows you what's going on. So I'm so grateful that decent people like you are willing to run. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to, clerk of courts. I have been hearing that AFTAB has been running into trouble with the fact that there are too many Republicans for the municipal courts. Tell me how the clerk of courts interacts with the courts and why he's been frustrated with the Republicans there.
So the clerk of courts, he houses the information. He controls like the information that's there, all of the cases, the case jackets, all of those things, those statistics that we were just talking about. He's the one that kind of keeps them, kind of stores all of the information. But he has to have permission from the judges to make that information accessible to everyone. And again, the majority rules. So the majority is Republican, they vote no. And a lot of times they're just voting no because he's AFTAB and they just want to obstruct anything that he's trying to do. So until we can get at least a majority of Democrats in place, that is not going to change.
How close do we?
Right now in municipal court, there are 8, well actually just because Judge Ruckers stepped down, there's 9 Republican judges and 5 Democratic judges. However, you know, I'm running, John Kennedy is running, Carrie Bloom is running, Janaea Trotter is running. So we all win, we're in control.
Yes. Are the observers that are going into the courtrooms making a difference in the behavior of the judges and the prosecutors?
Yes, so there was a judge who, and again, when you're there every day, everybody kind of talks, we talk to each other behind the scenes. And someone told me that a judge said to him, I feel like I can't do what I normally do because you all are sitting there watching everything I do and you're gonna file something against me if I set, some kind of bond you don't like. And I'm thinking inside my head, I'm doing like backflips and cheering because I'm like, yay. So yes, it makes a difference, especially if you have some kind of obvious t-shirt or jacket or something that says court watch, which is what I think the other people are doing. And there's 10 of you who come into a courtroom and sit down. That's very noticeable. The judge notices that, the bailiff notices, and goes and tells the judge. So, and then that judge goes and tells other judges. So, yes, they all notice, especially if you all had on kind of the same thing, just even a windbreaker or your button that said, where you're all wearing the same button. People notice that, and they absolutely communicate that to the judges. And I'll give you a perfect example. I have a million stories. So I'm in court representing a young lady, and she's got very minimum record, but she's got 1 felony. She's kicked out of drug court. And she gets rolled to a judge who tells me, and in drug court, it's possession of heroin. That's all it was, just 1 F5 possession, which is the lowest level you can have. So the judge calls me back in chambers and says, I'm sending your client to prison. And I was like, no, I don't want you to send her to prison. So we're kind of going back and forward about that for a moment. And then he finally, he's looking at me like, well, you seem really distraught about that. If you're so distraught, I'll just take you off and put on another attorney. Another bully tactic. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to take me off of her case. I don't want you to send her to prison. And so he responds to me, I don't understand why you're upset. You don't have to serve the time.
Oh, geez.
So of course, now I'm like extremely furious. So I go, and I'm walking around furious, and I post on my Facebook page, had a judge tell me today, I don't understand why you're upset, you don't have to serve the time. Now, I didn't say who the judge was, I didn't say what courtroom I was in, I didn't say what client it was. But that's what I posted on my Facebook page. And by the next morning, it had gotten back to him.
Oh.
So, of course, he called my boss, yet another bully tactic. Didn't do any good because I just kind of sat there angry because, we had to walk over and sit in his chambers and I had to listen to him talk about how great he was for an hour. And then, it didn't change anything. And that's what I meant when I told you guys earlier about just the bully tactics and how, there's this constant bullying. But more than that, if you all go in a group of 5 or more and you have something very distinctive on, letting them know that you're there to watch, it will race around the courthouse like a wildfire. Everyone will know that you're there. And it will make a difference.
Keep your mouth.
Susan.
Yeah, I just wonder, is this working? For the information that AFTEB wants, would a Freedom of Information Act cover that? Could you get it through that?
The information is already there, right?
Right.
It's just that you have to have a login to get to it. And you have to be an attorney to have a login. So, like if you wanted to go and look at the information, number one, you have to have a login, which you probably won't get. And then number two, it's not in any kind of reasonable, discernible order, any kind of way that you can say, okay, I want to see all of the cases that came through this particular courtroom in the last year. There's no way to do that, and I believe that that's what AFTAB is trying to do. So the information's already there, and if you go down there, you can look at all the files you want to look at, but that's really kind of unwieldy to do in the digital age. So, you can get the information if you want it, if you go down there and you ask to see it, but there should be an easy way. There should be a way that you can get on your computer and click on a link or a couple of links and see what's going on in that courthouse.
There is the issue of court costs. You haven't mentioned that. How does that figure into this? Is that money added on to the problem?
You need to put your microphone closer to your mouth.
It was close to my.
There we
He was asking me about court costs. So I talked about court costs a little earlier. Court costs are all, usually assessed by a lot of the judges, but they don't have to be. If you're indigent as a person in court, the judge can have an indigency hearing and waive the court costs. But the court cost, if you don't pay your court costs, then it causes your driver's license to be suspended. Your driver's license gets suspended, then you get continual, reinstatement fees from the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. It just compounds, the problem that we already have.
Could you give us a couple examples of the size of court costs?
Well, I think Judge Hunter, her court costs are in excess of $30,000, but that's kind of the at
Ordinary
extreme.
cases.
Ordinary cases, I've seen court costs because some judges will attach court costs to every single case. And if a person has 6 driving cases, then court costs are about $115. So that's $115 times 6 plus whatever the fines are. And if you make $10 an hour, that is insurmountable for you.
They're expecting her to pay $3,200 a month on her court costs. She has no livelihood.
Mike, someone else is waiting.
You can have an indigency hearing, and I think that again, but it's up to the judge to do that.
Okay, I know that we're running out of time, and you've been talking very eloquently about what we can do on a local level to try and be more active in this court system, and maybe I'm gonna ask a question that's hopeless, but last week on PBS, they did a very good job of presenting how the current White House administration is stuffing all of the where they have the option to put judges in place without them being elected, and the appellate, et cetera. And I was astonished that the levels and the conditions for which a judge has to meet in order to be put in have been lowered, that there are prosecuting attorneys that have never pled a case that are being awarded judgeships.
Those are
Right.
federal judgeships. So
Right.
the president has the ability to appoint federal judges, and those judges are lifetime appointments.
Yes, they are,
So-
and they're 36 years old, 40 years old, they are
Yes.
stuffing them with young people.
I've been watching that, so he's been putting people, and because the rules of the Senate have been broken, they cannot filibuster. All they need is just 51 votes, they have that, so they've just kind of been shuffling them through.
Rubber
And,
stamping them.
Yes.
Is there anything that we as the public can raise our voices and protest about? I'm looking at that and seeing that as potentially having more impact on our nation than anything else that's happened under this administration, because it goes forward for a lifetime of it. I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, somebody that's 36 years old.
What I will tell you is that the federal level and the local level elections matter. It does, and while, a lot of people will tell you, give your money, I'm gonna ask you to give your time. Go and have a house party. Invite everybody on your street to come to your house and talk about a particular candidate. That helps, and then, challenge the people who come to your house party to have a house party and invite more people. That's what we can do. You've got to change the players in order to change the game.
That's right.
But we can't do anything about it federally, is what
Not right
you're
now.
saying. Nothing.
You've got to get that guy out of the White House. We got to get him out of there.
And
we've-
McConnell.
we've-
But we can't do anything about those judges that are already in place, can we?
They can be impeached, but there's a very high standard for that. They'd have to do something horrendously wrong, and I can tell you that most of them won't. And again, we have to understand kind of how our government works, and what I will say is that, the House can vote to impeach all they want to. The trial is in the Senate.
That's right.
And they have to have 65% of the senators vote to put him out of office. Over 50% of the senators are Republicans. It's not going to happen. Can we focus our energy on something else? Like, this is how our government works. It's like, government 101. So every time I see that and hear it, it's like I get frustrated because I'm like, clearly you don't know how the government that you are running works. Because I get it, there are horrible things happening. However, if you know that at the trial, you've got this guy who's already said that, that's not gonna happen, why are we wasting our time on that? Inform the public, let the public know of every bad thing that's happening. Let the public know that he has completely gutted the government, that the Federal Election Commission now has 3 people on it instead of the 6 that it's supposed to have. So if there's a problem with our federal election, there's nobody to oversee it, because it's been gutted. Everybody is acting so-and-so. So when you hear somebody called acting Secretary of State or acting this or acting that, it means that there's been no hearings, there's been no vetting, there's been no background checks, there's nothing. So we've got these people who haven't been checked by our, Secret Service or whomever does these background checks, going over and talking to foreign governments. I mean, it's that kind of thing. It's like knowledge is power. And most people don't know or they don't know and they aren't paying attention to what's going on. I watch those things about the judges because I understand how federal courts impact all of us. So I know exactly what you're talking about. But that's not the only thing that's happening. He is eroding civil rights on a daily basis. And that woman who runs the education department, she's doing the same thing.
She's doing because it was her computers at the University of Michigan allowed all the hacking to go on in the last election. She got rewarded for her hacking.
Fascism, here we come.
Yes, I'll give you an FYI. It will take 20 Republican senators with the Democrats to impeach Donald Trump. Now, as it stands, when the date comes for closing the nomination process, where Donald Trump can put a candidate up against an existing senator, after that date, these senators are free and clear to vote their conscience. The problem is that it's going to take 20 senators on the Republican side, and unless 20 senators agree that they're going to do this, it's not going to be done, because if you don't kill the king, if you're going to do it, you have to kill the king. It's as simple as that. You have to succeed or you don't do it at all.
I agree with you 100%, so I just think that, you know, that their time would be better spent maybe telling everybody what's going on. Like, this is what's happening here today. This is what's happening here today. This is the problem with this person acting so-and-so. You know, there's no employees in a lot of these government agencies. You know, all of the regulations that, you know, were put in place by President Obama, you know, they're being rolled back. I mean, it's just, you know, we need to pay more attention to what's going on with our government. And, you know, all of this stuff that's just kind of it's a distraction.
It's their job. We've heard passion here.
Yeah.
And seems like there's still more passion, and you can have her when she's finished with my Facebook. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have heard from Arica Underwood. I've gotten my loins upset just listening to you. Next week, there is no meeting in this hall because this room is being used as a voting place. So we cannot meet next week. Did you hear that? Yes. No next week. No meeting next week. No meeting next week. And the week after that is Dick Galloway, who's going to speak on how do we heal our broken nation. Here we go. Reframing our political message, and then followed by Kate Schroeder, who's going after Steve Chavez. Thank you for coming in with a wonderful audience today. Thank you. You can see her immediately or after Facebook. Thank you.